Alright, now the first thing you'll need to do is take out your CD and you'll need to print out your pattern, your instructions, and the layout. Now when you print your pattern off, you're going to print it off in order like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. You're going to tape the pieces together following these arrows. Your pieces will overlap. See, here's a portion of that arrow. The other portion is right here. You're going to line those up and you're going to tape your pieces together just like this. Once you have your pattern pieces all pieced and taped together, you're going to cut out the size that you need for your project. Here are our basic pattern pieces. We have our bodice, our sleeve, and the skirt of our swim dress. Now some people prefer to have a jumper or a sleeveless swim dress, so I'm going to show you how you can adjust this pattern for just that. Alright, assuming this is the edge of your pattern, you're going to take a separate piece of paper and you're just going to trace your line right here. And you're going to want to bring your pattern up about an inch, more if you choose. You'll simply hold the pattern piece up to you, assuming a little bit of space for the seam allowance, so it's going to be a little bit lower. Just hold it up to you and see how much you really need to raise. I'm going to raise this piece about an inch. There you go, about an inch. So there you have it. You have easily raised that arm opening an inch. Simply tape it in place and trim it to size. And here it is, all ready to use to make a sleeveless or a jumper style swim dress with the underarm raised, just like that. Okay, we're not going to make a sleeveless, so I've taken that back off. That was just free advice in case you decide to make a sleeveless or a jumper style swim dress. Now let's refer to our layout page. Now this layout page is showing us that our fabric is to be doubled over twice, and let me show you how we go about that. Now here's our fabric for swimwear. It's 4-way stretch, and this is nylon lycra. Now I have the fold over here, and way back over here I have the selvage. What I'm going to do is fold this over in such a way that I put this fold over here with the selvage, and now I have a double fold over here. Now for the standard waist swim dress, you'll need to cut out a tie. Your tie is going to be 3 inches wide, and you're going to go ahead and cut it out, and again, your fabric is 4 layers. In other words, it's folded over twice. You're going to measure out the 3 inches, and you can mark it with a pencil, or if you have the luxury of having a rotary cutter, you can just slice it right there. If you don't, you're just going to simply mark it with a pencil or a piece of chalk and bring your scissors over and trim it. Now I'm going to simply cut it in half, and that's going to create both of our ties that we're going to need. Now I've laid my pieces out in such a way that where it says place on fold, do not cut, they're right here against this double fold. Right here, and all of this right here. And then I put my tie over here. Now let me point out that if you're making an adult size, you're going to want to take your skirt piece and you're going to lay it out, cut it out like this, just on the double. In other words, just fold it over this one time. Cut your skirt piece out, and then you're going to move it down, and you're going to cut your skirt piece out again. And that'll give you plenty of fabric to work with. Now, if you've taken our 12-week beginner course, you know that there is a proper way to pin. Here it is. You pin pointing at the corners, and you pin perpendicular to the straight lines. Now I'm going to cut out my piece, and I'm going to cut all the way around here, and I'm going to stop right here. In other words, remember, don't cut along the fold. Alright, now here's our piece cut out. Now don't worry about these darts yet. I'll address those later. All right, now I have taken off my primary fabric and we are going to reuse our bodice pattern piece. We're going to use it for the lining. I've laid my lining out much like we laid out our primary fabric, with the piece doubled over. So we have 4 layers of fabric that we're cutting out at once. Again, I'm placing it on the fold so you're not going to cut along this line. Now simply cut your pattern piece out. The right side is the pretty side, the side that you want to see when the garment is done. We're going to place those sides together and we're going to pin right here and here, right at the shoulders. Now we're going to do the same thing at the lining of the bodice, right here and here and here and here at the shoulders. Now we're going to take our pieces to the sewing machine and we're going to straight stitch at 5/8 inch seam allowance all 4 of those shoulder seams. Now I am using a stretch needle. A stretch needle or a ballpoint needle is very important when sewing on stretchy fabrics. I recommend the stretch needle. I start in needle down position, just like this, and I'm going to stitch forward a couple of stitches. I'm going to reverse a couple of stitches. Then I'm going to straight stitch all the way across, right here lined up with the 5/8 inch mark. And I'm going to do that on all 4 of my shoulder seams. All right, now make sure that you're not pulling and you're not pushing. You're going to let the feed dogs do all the work for you. That way you don't end up with any puckering or gathering. And now for our lining. And I always stop and remove the pins. I never sew over pins when at all possible. Now remember, it's always a good idea to lock your seam at the beginning and the end of each seam. All right, now remember, we have our right sides together and I have pinned all the way around our neck. I first started by opening up both the bottom and the top seams and pinning them open. Pinning them together and pinning them open. And then I went on around the rest of the neck. Now use as many pins as you need because this is very slippery fabric. Now we're going to take our piece to the sewing machine and we're going to zigzag stitch all the way around our neck at 5/8 inch. All right, I prefer to start just behind one of these shoulder seams and I stitch forward a couple, remove the pin, reverse, and then I go ahead and I stitch forward at 5/8 inch all the way around this circle. Now remember to let your feed dogs do the work for you. Don't push, don't pull, otherwise you'll end up with puckering and gathering. Okay, now here is our finished neckline. Now anytime you have a severe curve like this, you have to put notches in. So I'm going to go right here and all the way around our neckline, and I'm going to notch, being very careful not to cut through the seam that we just stitched. All right, now I've finished notching all the way around my neck, and I have also trimmed off about 1/4 inch on each side, right here and right here, to cut down on the bulk. We're going to turn our piece right side out now. This is how we're going to do that. Pushing it just right through that neckline. Now here we have our piece turned. I'm going to again pin all the way around this neckline, and now we're going to zigzag stitch a top stitch all the way around because we want this nice and sturdy. Now we're going to zigzag the top stitch all the way around our neckline, and this will keep your neckline from rolling. Now notice I'm not doing 5/8 inch seam allowance. I'm going right along the very edge. Here we have a beautiful neckline, and that's because we took our time and we made the notches and we let the feed dogs do the work. We didn't push and we didn't pull. So you have a very beautiful result. Now the next thing we're going to do is work on our darts. To do that, I've taken my pattern piece, the bodice, and I've cut the dart out that corresponds with the size that I'm making, in this case medium. And I'm going to lay that on the lining. Here's the inside, my lining piece. And I'm going to line that right up with it, the edges, just like this, and I'm going to draw that onto my lining. Next I'm going to flip my pattern over and I'm going to do the dart on this side. Now once you've drawn your darts on, you're going to carefully pin all the way around them because we do not want any slipping and sliding. And I pin almost like a box all the way around them. Now we've pinned all around our darts, and the reason we've done that is to keep them from slipping and sliding because we've pinned both pieces of fabric. Now we're going to bend this over very carefully and we're going to pin our darts. This is how we're going to do it. I'm going to take my pin and I'm going to push it through the bottom of this dart right here, and I'm going to come over and I'm going to have it come out the bottom of that dart. Of that side of the dart. I'm going to bend it over. Now I know it's lined up. And I'm going to come to the top of our dart, which is the point, and I'm going to put a pin right here so I know my stopping point. Okay, so I know now as I look at this, I know to begin sewing right here, and I'm going to follow this line all the way up to the point, and I'm going to go off the fabric right here. And we're going to do the exact same thing on all 4 of our darts. All right, now we're going to take our piece back to the sewing machine and we're going to go back to straight stitching. We're going to stitch our darts starting from the bottom and going up. Just like this, I'm folding my piece over, and I'm going to follow the line of my dart that I drew on earlier. Now I'm going to start in needle down position as always. I'm going to take a stitch forward, go in reverse. I'm going to grab that needle out of there, that pin out of there, so that I don't run over it. Now I'm going to very carefully stitch all the way up that line, going at an angle. And remember that stop pin that I put right at the top? It tells me where to stop. I took that out now, and I'm going to go right off the fabric, reverse, go right back on the fabric, and go right back off the fabric again. Let me show you what that looks like. So what I've done is I started at the bottom, I stitched straight up that line, and I came off the fabric, and I backed back on the fabric and came off the fabric again, just to reinforce that tip right there. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing on all 4 of the darts. I've removed the pins, and here are our beautiful darts on both the front and the back. We're going to do our sleeve now, but before we go to that, I want to show you what you're going to do if you would like to have a sleeveless swim dress. I'm going to take our 2 pieces and I'm going to fold them in, and then we're going to top stitch. This is how we're going to do that. I'm going to fold it in right about 1/2 inch all the way along, and I'm going to pin it. Use lots and lots of pins for this. So now here's what I've done. I've turned this in a little bit less perhaps than 1/2 inch all the way along here, and I pinned it. Lots and lots of pins. And if you're wanting to make this a sleeveless swim dress, I would simply take this to the sewing machine and I would zigzag stitch all the way along here, just like we did around our neckline. I would do that probably twice to give you some nice stability. And then you'd have a sleeveless swim dress. Then the rest of our swim dress is exactly the same. I'm not making a sleeveless swim dress this time, so I'm just going to pull these pins out and I'm going to show you what you'll do for a sleeved swim dress. Now we're going to put our sleeves on our swim bodice. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to take our sleeve and we're going to center it. I'm going to fold it in half just like this and I'm going to squeeze it. So now I know I found exactly the very center of my sleeve and I'm going to line that up over this seam right here, just like this. I'm going to pin that in place as a reference point. Just like that. Now I am going to simply pin right along the edge here and I'm going to pin my sleeve all the way on. Alright, now I have pinned both sleeves on. So you see I have right sides together, here's my sleeve, and see I pinned it all the way around just like this, and I'm going to take this to the sewing machine with the zigzag stitch again, and I'm going to zigzag stitch all the way along this at 5/8 inch. Alright, now I'm going to start my sleeve, and again, as always, I'm going to let the feed dogs do all the work, and I'm just going to stop long enough to pull out the pins. Now that I've zigzag stitched my sleeve one time, I'm going back over it and I'm going to give it a second layer of zigzag stitching. This will give it a lot of stability. Alright, here they are. We have both of our sleeves stitched on, and I'll show you from the outside. And those are going to be very cute. Alright, now we're going to create our tie backs. To do that, we're going to fold our pieces over, just like this, the long way, and we're going to pin them in place. Next, we're going to take them to the sewing machine and we're going to straight stitch all the way along here at 1/4 inch. Okay, now I'm going to straight stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Alright, now I'm going to do the same thing on this tie.